my grandfather went to Vietnam twice, and he was shot with a 50 cal, and I don't know how many transfusions he had, but that man did not have the will to die. He was going to make it. And so I have to remember that. And then when I think about, everything that my dad went through, and I couldn't imagine after, not to harp on it. And again, I don't live here, but just to think about those men that had to run out of a city, run a mile, geared up, running out of ammo. The city's coming in on you, and you have to fight. And this is what my dad talks about a lot. And that's why I watched how he, reflect, move forward. I watched how he moved forward. He said, you have to stay in the fight.
Welcome to the Cops and Riders Podcast. Your host, Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell, worked the streets in one of the nation's largest police departments for over 25 years. Ride along with O'Donnell and his expert guests as they help you navigate the oftentimes confusing and misunderstood world of law enforcement. O'Donnell and his guests on this show do not represent any law enforcement agency. The content of this show is not meant to be legal advice. If you think you need a lawyer, you probably do.
Hey, Cops and Riders, thanks for being here with us today for another episode of the Cops and Riders Podcast. I'm Patrick O'Donnell, and I'll be your host for today's show. This show is listener-supported, so thanks to all of you who keep the show going. I would especially like to thank those of you who are patrons of the show. Your generosity helps pay for the software, equipment, and my time producing this show. Yes, you too can become a patron for less than a cup of coffee or a pint of Guinness. Just head on over to patreon.com/Cops and Riders. Welcome, everyone, to this very special episode of the Cops and Riders Podcast. I know the podcast title is Cops and Riders, but sometimes you come across a story and person who isn't a cop that just stands out. Anyone who knows anything about cops knows that military and police work often intersect. So I thought this would be a great interview. My guest on the show today, Mary Howe, is an Air Force veteran and daughter of a military legacy family. Mary's mom is a retired Army major. Her father, Master Sergeant Paul Howe, was Delta and was in the Battle of Mogadishu that later became the source of the movie Blackhawk Down. Her grandpa was Lieutenant Colonel Charles Beckwith, the founder of Delta Force. To say that her family has a history of being of service at the highest of levels would be an understatement. A little bit about Mary. Mary Howe is a former Air Force Special Operations AC-130U aerial gunner turned family nurse practitioner, now working in veteran disability medicine. Her work sits at the intersection of service, identity, and personal responsibility, shaped by a life spent in high-performance environments and a refusal to let performance define her worth. She is the writer behind Unfinished Business, a body of work that documents growth in real time without the polish or the illusion of having it all figured out. Her perspective challenges the habit of outsourcing direction, calling people back to internal leadership, self-trust, and the work that happens long before anything looks successful from the outside. Her background spans military service, medicine, and a lineage rooted in special operations, but her focus is simple: helping people think better, take ownership, and build something internally that doesn't collapse when circumstances change. It was an honor and joy chatting with Mary. Please enjoy my conversation with someone who is truly inspirational. Mary Catherine Howe, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Patrick?
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. And first things first, I have to thank the most awesome Steve Murphy for the introduction.
Isn't he the best?
He really is. He's like the most humble, nice guy that has done some amazing stuff that most, like less than half the percentage of the population has ever done. And he's just matter of fact about it and so cool. And we've just become fast friends. And it just, but that's the power of podcasts. 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 4 years ago, if you would have said, yeah, you're going to meet this guy that took down Pablo Escobar and have lunch with him and talk almost every week, I'd be like, you're smoking dope. There's no way. But it's the world we live in right now, so I can't be happier about it. I mean, but Steve is a great guy. He's over at the Game of Crimes podcast, and He has some most excellent shows and guests, and we swap, guests and bounce ideas off each other. And I couldn't be happier. So thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. You are one cool guy.
I would say. So, growing up, did you have any choice of what you wanted to do growing up?
Yeah, I think I did.
Did you?
My parents were really open. They, of course, well, the choice was you're gonna either work or go to school. We're gonna
Right.
pick between those two things, of course. But they really wanted me to kind of do what I wanted to do, which was such a blessing. And I didn't know for the longest time. And I've shared a little bit about this before with when I was in high school, I was filling out the applications. And that's when it really, I first realized that I don't want to go to school because it's like, why do you want to go to our program? And I was like, I don't. My mom wants me to go to your program. She wanted me to be a Georgia Bulldog. It didn't work out.
Okay.
Um, so I looked, at that and I was like, okay, that's telling for me. If don't have any desire to do this, what else can I do? And with the military, it's something that I was exposed to with family very young and under mindset and mentality. And I was like, I want to enlist. And my parents were like, join the Air Force. That's what you need to do if you're going to enlist, if you're not going to become an officer. And because they're both Army. And so that's what really set me down my path.
Yeah, we should give my listeners and viewers some background here. Your mom, Connie, was a major in the Army Reserves, correct?
She was.
And your dad, Master Sergeant Paul Howe, is it Howe or Ho? Howe.
How?
Howe was Delta, which is incredibly like super secret squirrel, the elite of the elite. I mean, that's super high speed. And he was in the Battle of Mogadishu. And on top of all that, your grandpa is Lieutenant Colonel Charles Beckwith, the founder of Delta. I mean, what a lineage there. I mean, not too many people can say all of that, But for context, could you explain the differences? You hear these things kind of get interchanged and intermingled with, on social media or TV or whatever. There's Delta, SF, Ranger Regiment, Ranger Tab, PJs. And now, Delta, I think, is called Combat Applications Group, CAG.
Mhm.
So could you kind of give us a breakdown of what those differences are?
Yeah, so it's kind of a tiered system. So there's special forces and then there's special operations. And there's nuance there a little bit, but they just kind of do different things in different roles. Each branch has their own entity. I was in Air Force Special Operations, and so the Army, their special operations, Delta is their unit. Special forces would be more like Green Beret. So to get to CAG or Delta, then you would probably, I don't know anything about the what's the word, the processor, if you
Mm,
will, but I would imagine you would start at SF and then you go where you work your way around. I don't know too much Rangers. I know they do more like ground, bigger assault forces, maybe. Oh gosh, don't
yeah.
come at me, guys. I was in the Air Force.
Sorry
And
for putting you on
oh,
I
it's
should.
it's good. And
Okay.
so each branch kind of has their thing, like the Navy SEALs, that's like their tier of it. Delta's more, a little bit
Right.
different. So yeah.
There's SEALs and there's SEAL Team 6. That is kind of like a higher tier. My son was in the Army for 8 years. He was
Yep.
active, and I'm wearing my Army t-shirt very proudly. And he was explaining. I called him yesterday. I said, "Okay, I'm interviewing this gal." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Then I call my buddy that I worked with for years, Jason. He was in the Air Force for 20 years, and he was a mechanic for AC-130s.
Oh wow.
So, I mean, he deployed a bunch of times,
Yeah.
and yeah, he has some awesome stories. And what really stuck in my mind with those, I always envisioned those planes to be so big and clunky. He said, no, they're maneuverable. He said, those pilots can do some amazing things with those
Yeah.
planes. He says, I was shocked. He said, just how maneuverable and what those pilots, he said, it's like they're flying a little Cessna around and it's this ginormous plane. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Man, we had some phenomenal pilots because she's a little clunky and she can get a little heavy, and
Yeah.
so they know how to fly that thing like a commercial jet. They're phenomenal,
Yes,
phenomenal.
it is amazing. And just I didn't know anything about PJs until like maybe 10 years ago. Well, less than that. I interviewed Rick Prado. He was in the CIA, but before he was in the CIA, he had a long tour as a PJ. And he's telling me the stuff they're doing, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so
Yeah.
cool. And I just saw in the news yesterday there was a group of PJs that were on some kind of training mission off the coast of Florida, and a plane had to ditch in the ocean. It was a smaller one. There was 11 occupants,
Oh,
and they're ditched in the ocean. These PJs come to the rescue. They're in their helicopter, and they've got 5 minutes of fuel left. And it's like, of course, they're not going to leave those people, floating around the
no.
ocean, and but that's just one example of, military, police, they save so many more lives than they have ever taken. It is just,
Oh yeah.
and that never gets, sensationalized. It's never going to get,
And it won't.
whatever,
Yeah.
which is sad.
It's the unfortunate, yet it comes with that job. I always think about that too with, three-letter agencies. Like how many events have not occurred that we'll
Oh,
never hear about, you know?
absolutely. It was amazing to me, 2020 was, it was pretty horrible. And, I had friends that were like, well, the police have these tanks in the middle of the street, with all these George Floyd riots, et cetera. And, we don't need this and we don't need that. And I'm like, do you know how many things they have prevented? They have intel that you'll never know about.
Yeah, never.
You'll never hear it. You'll never know about it. And they're risking their lives, and they're, yeah, yeah. I just want to just reach out and strangle people sometimes. It's like, stop being so stupid. Stop being so ignorant. Just be happy they're doing their jobs.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, oh well, I'll get off that tangent. But so, I was thinking to myself, when I was preparing for this, I'm thinking, what was talk around the dinner table? I mean, your your dad was in Mogadishu, grandpa's the founder of Delta, your mom's a major. I mean, did they talk about it much?
No.
Really?
No. My dad he doesn't talk a lot about it.
Okay.
As I've gotten older, he's little things, will come out. Um, and then my grandfather, he passed a year after I was born, so I
Okay.
never got to know him. I love the stories that my mom tells me about him,
Yeah.
especially from that, the familial standpoint, and that he liked to go and he had this an aesthetic eye for, decorating the house and all the furniture in our home. And it's like this fascinating side of him that
You wouldn't
I
th
love.
you wouldn't think that the founder of Delta,
I know.
this badass, elite soldier
Yeah.
is got an eye for fashion, for
You know,
interior design.
yeah. Some of the furniture in my mom's house, I'm like, oh, that's good. She's like, yeah, my dad picked that out. And I'm like, who would have thought? But there's that. And then there's just this air of that. If the call comes, everyone in my family, we have that mentality and that push and that grit to go forward. Just like my grandfather, he warrior, my dad, warrior. And so I think when I was young, I didn't understand it because a lot of our dinner table talks were more, I would say, like not necessarily tactical based, but there was this air of this philosophical nature of how to evaluate situations, how to evaluate people, thinking three-dimensionally and outside of the box. Like that was always at the core of those
Mm,
conversations.
okay.
And but for me that was everyday normal. I don't know what other people's dinner table conversations are like. So,
I
but
don't
there
know
was
if
definitely
I don't know if you're gonna do a tabletop exercise with, okay, the potatoes are a hill over here, the mashed potatoes are a river,
yeah, and I think it was more of that again, that nature of like being human being and intent and how to live a good life. Life is hard. That was always expressed to me, and you have to work and you have to go forward and push. So that kind of wraps up the dinner table
Okay,
conversations. Yeah.
gotcha. Now, growing up, were you a stereotypical army brat? Did you move around a lot, or what did that look like?
No, so after Somalia, that's when we moved to East Texas. So I am from, it's called Nacogdoches, Texas. It's the smallest or the oldest town in Texas, small town. And that's where we stayed. We planted roots there. My dad retired from the Army and he trains law enforcement officers. That's what he's done since like 1999. He has a over 300-acre shooting range there.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I grew up in. And so he built out that range, and then he also traveled and did a lot of training on the road with law enforcement officers, conferences, and then ended up, once everything was built, bringing people to his facility. So I grew up with LE, three-letter agencies. That was normal, if they were coming to the house, if they were, with work and everything. So um, we pretty much stayed put. Now, Patrick, I did feel kind of like an alien in that town sometimes. Like I
Really?
didn't fit in. Small town, East Texas. People are generational. There's a lot of generational families, and then here we come, this and land. And so my mom was an army brat, traveled everywhere. My dad, he's from California, but then has traveled with the army. So we all just ended up in Texas.
Okay, so you caught the tail end after, all the moving and all that. But here you are in
Mhm.
this town, 300 acres, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a whole lot of land.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna guess you're a good shot.
I don't have any bad habits.
Do you remember your first recollections of handling a weapon and your dad like teaching you this stuff?
Yes.
How old were you, do you think?
I have the picture. I don't know how old I was. Man, I was second or third grade, it had to have been
Okay,
somewhere in there. My dad is very, like, professionalism is at the core
sure.
of my father, and especially when it comes to handling weapons, there is no playing around. It is very serious, because safety is the utmost important thing.
Absolutely.
And so I remember, there's always kind of that air of like, I need to get this right. And so there's intimidation. And when you're that young, you don't know what you're doing. And then my dad's, he's a big guy, and that's what he does. And he has his methodology to ensure that we're doing everything the right way. So it was a lot. But I love the picture that I have from it of him behind me helping me hold the
Aw.
pistol. It's so cute. So
Was it like a revolver, a 22, or
can't even remember.
okay.
It was a bigger, I'd have to look at it. I can't remember.
Of course, there's all kinds of debate when it comes to guns. And, for me, I grew up in Chicago as a little kid. Then I wound up in rural Wisconsin, a town of 10,000 people when I was a freshman in high school. I've handled guns before that. I had friends that had guns, their parents had guns, etc. And there was never any accidents because it's like, okay, you knew all the basics, you knew all the safety stuff. But then when I went to this little town, one of my best friends was a farmer. So I'm like, oh, cool. I thought the farm was like the coolest thing in the world because I'd never been on one before. And him and his brothers are like, this sucks. It's drudgery. We're out working, sun up to sundown. And I thought, we get to bale hay today? Yes, this is so awesome. They're like, oh, God, it's 100 degrees out. We're
Another day,
baling
yeah.
hay. Yeah. And I thought it was the best thing ever. But I remember they had a broom closet like off the kitchen packed with guns. They were all loaded. There was no locks on anything, and there was never an accident. Never. Because everybody respected them and knew, it's same thing. It's like when I became a cop, the first thing you learn when you're with firearms is safety. Where does your finger go? The only time your finger's on the trigger is when you want it to go boom. You don't need an exterior safety. The safety is your finger. There should be no accidents. What's the craziest thing you saw when you were a cop? My first week on the job, a guy running at me with a butcher knife. He just killed his brother over the last hot dog. That's chapter 1. There are 33 more. Police Stories, The Rookie Years just launched. Available now on Amazon. Search Police Stories Patrick O'Donnell or click the link in the show notes. Back to the show.
And I think there's that LE side of it with that mentality, but then there's also the civilian, he trains civilians too. And so
Okay.
sometimes I would think with more my generation being raised with video games, there are people that have bad habits. They
Yeah.
see these things and they just don't know. And so having to train that layer of safety in, there's a saying, am I allowed to curse?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So one ah shit wipes away all the attaboys kind
Yeah.
of thing. So you always have to be ready for it. And so yeah, but having that respect is so important.
Yes, absolutely. So, when you're growing up, how would your friends in high school describe you?
I don't know. High school was rough. High school
Okay.
was rough. I did not have a good experience. I was so over it, you know. I wanted out of that town. I was kind of
Okay.
rebellious. I definitely went through a period until my I'd say end of my junior year, senior year, that's when I really kind of evened out. But probably a little bit wild, and then kind of turned more to an introverted state
Okay.
in high school. And we can dive into all that if you want, but
Well, so you're a little wild. My next question was, did you have a rebellious stage, and what did that look like? And the follow-up to that is,
terrible.
how did your parents respond to that?
Oh, God bless him for putting up with me. Um, I think when I was younger, I started having panic attacks in middle school.
Oh, wow.
And I don't
Okay.
think we knew what that was, especially at that time period. The big mental health boom didn't happen. And so went to the doctor and just kind of brushed it off. And it kept kind of happening. And then eventually it eased out. But I think I had a lot of anxiety and pent up energy that I did not understand what to do with. And I felt like I didn't fit in with this typical East Texas um culture, if you will. Like I wanted to go and do more, and because I didn't know how to bottle this in or verbalize it, I internalized a lot of things, and so I needed an outlet. And so when I was young, poof, in high school, like started drinking, got in with like that crowd.
Okay.
And I think I did it as a way to release my anxiety,
Mm,
to go, oh, okay, I don't have to feel so spun up tight all the time. But then there's a portion of that where I just never, this is all in my head. I never felt good enough.
mm.
And that was a big root for me. And seeing how I never understood why my parents could have everything. It seemed like, you see them and they're like, oh, they're so professional. They have all these things and they're go-getters and they're top tier.
Right.
And here I am, and I just felt like I was none of those. And I think I just struggled with that, and I never verbalized it, and I should have. And so I definitely got in trouble with alcohol and partying. And I don't know, I can't remember when, but I decided to flip a switch. It was
Mm,
like night and day, like
yeah.
junior, senior year. I got really into running and working out. I this probably wasn't healthy, but I did kind of isolate and I just did my routine. I would run, go to school. I started working. So I worked at like a fast food restaurant for a while, and then I ended up interning at the police department, and then just started really going through that routine until I went and joined the Air Force. But I'm sure my poor parents had to, I don't think they understood or knew how to help me. And I think looking back now is understanding where my headspace was. I think we're so quick to go, you can't do that. And it's like those are all symptoms of something else being wrong. And so I've learned how to get to the root of that as I've, grown older.
Interesting. Now,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you grew up in a strict home.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
what did that look like? I have visions of your parents bouncing quarters off your bed, doing so.
Oh boy. You definitely like cleaning, helping out, doing everything, staying busy, no matter what was important. It didn't matter if I felt tired and it was Saturday and I wanted to watch TV as a, middle schooler. Like if my dad needed help with the yard work, we're gonna go do it. And I don't know why in my head I just felt like, oh, no one else has to go through this experience. But then it was nice before we started recording, hearing your kind of what you told me about how when you were 16 getting a job, and it's like that was what my life was. You went, and I just didn't. I had no perception, perhaps. And then my parents were raised in a different era,
Right, right.
and they brought that into the household of kind of that, I call it like the 70s mentality. And that's what our household was in the 90s. So it just didn't translate sometimes. And I needed, who knows what I needed, but it's all good. I'm glad everything happened the way it did to make
Sure.
me who I am today. But it was definitely really strict,
Now,
really,
did
really strict.
did you have to like maintain your bedroom? Like bed had to be made. There couldn't be like fast food wrappers in there, or everything had to be
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah. I also, your mom's gonna be going through with a white glove or something. I mean, was it that bad or?
No, not that bad. Like, because there were definitely times when I slacked, but I paid for it. Like my dad would, if I got in trouble, especially when I got in trouble with drinking, like my dad PT'd me like no one's business. And so I learned that very even when I was younger and would get in trouble for things like, okay, sweet, you're gonna run. And then when you're done running, go wash your mom's car. Okay, go run again. Like he was smart and but it worked, you know? Because I was like, this sucks. I'm not doing this again.
Well,
Oh, so
I guess you do what you know, and your dad was a leader, and he still is, I'm sure. Your mom was as well. She was an officer. So, you kind of fall back on what you know and what you were trained to do. And,
mhm,
with me, I just remember, the bed had to be squared away. There could not be any like dirty clothes on the ground. They had to be in a hamper.
mhm.
You had to I mean, it was so strict in my house. It's like I remember taking a shower. After like 3 or 4 minutes, my mom would be banging on the door. She's like, "You think
Oh
water is
no.
free? Water isn't free. How
Oh
much hot water are you using?" I'm just like, I'm hurrying. Can I get the shampoo out of my face?" It's like,
yeah.
oh my God. But I had zero privacy. There was one
Yeah.
phone in the house, and if I was on the phone, like trying to ask out a girl or something like that, my mom was standing right next to me.
Oh my
He went
goodness.
through all of my mail, if I had any mail. And I mean, I'm a teenager, and then I lived at home a little bit after high school, which was a mistake looking back. But, great parents, but zero, and I mean zero privacy. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I think your dad doesn't have to be a Delta operator to have, to grow up in that super crazy strict, world, but it instills things in your head though too. But now I'm thinking to myself, how difficult was it to have a social life or like bring a date over to the house? Oh, who's your father? Oh, he's that guy that was in Blackhawk Down for real. You want to meet him? That would be awkward.
That didn't happen. I did not have a social life, and I think that's what kind of also led me to have that rebellious period is because
Yeah.
that was not allowed. Like I was not, if my mom was out of town and my dad was home, like I wasn't allowed to go to the movies. I wasn't allowed to leave the house, so it just I felt kind of that pressure as a teenager. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I feel your pain. That I'll just say that. Yeah. And there has to be a happy medium. And I did my best with my kids. Of course I screwed up, I'm sure multiple times, but it's just I tried. And I would always say it's like, kids, you have no clue what heart is. Zero clue. Yeah, then I start telling
Yeah.
stories of my childhood and I know they don't believe me or they're like, "Grandma and grandpa are that crazy?" I'm like, "Yes, yes they are."
And it's full circle because my daughter's 6, and so it's like you get it once you're a parent. Your parents are just doing the best they can with what
Yes.
they got, and that's all it is. Because it's like I feel that too. And then as times change, and you're like, oh, this is what their world is like. There's so much to it, and that's why I'm like, it's all good. It's part of the experience. Looking back, of course, in it, I probably did not feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's all different ways, obviously, and my best advice is your kids do not have privacy. I mean, not to the extent of like what I went through, but it's a different ballgame with social media, the internet.
Yeah.
There's so many predators out there, Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like you have to stay on top of that. You have to.
you
You
have
got to
to.
be up in their business. You have to be.
There's so much with it. I see it and it's sometimes it feels not real, you
Yeah,
know?
you're right.
And
It
it's
just,
just,
I mean, when I was on the police department, we had a couple of detectives that were impersonating, they were like dudes and they were impersonating like 13, 14-year-old girls on the internet. And these
ah,
super creeps were doing,
yeah.
I mean, just it's disgusting. It's a scary world out there.
Yep.
It's just ugh, God.
Mm.
So yeah. So yeah, the first thing that popped into my head was like, oh yeah, have fun bringing a boy over to the house. And yeah, my dad is a super high tier operator that you could kill you 50 different ways before you put your can of Coke down on on the table.
I'm
But
not
yeah, okay.
I don't even think I can repeat said, what he would say if I ever at that age brought a boy over. I'm not gonna say
Oh
it.
come on, I want to hear it.
Oh man. I got to table this one.
Okay. All right. But I can only imagine. It's like
Yeah.
I got remarried after I got divorced and I had a teenage daughter all of a sudden. I had two boys before, and now I've got a 15-year-old girl who is very social. And, she's
Hmm.
bringing boys over to the house and she says, "You're impossible." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You come home, you're wearing a uniform, you have a gun on your hip." I said, "I was never mean to these boys." But she said, "They were all scared of you." And I'm like, they shouldn't be. But if there's a part of me that's like, good, they should be scared.
Good. Yes. Yes.
Be scared. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yes.
So I think I read or heard somewhere you didn't realize the gravity of your father's service until you read the book Blackhawk Down. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You were in high school,
You-
correct?
I was in high school.
What were your first
So
thoughts? What were your thoughts?
very emotional.
Yeah.
Very. My dad was stoic. When I was younger, I was like, okay, my dad's in the army. Like I'd see him in his uniform, but I didn't understand. And then I think the movie came out in 2001 and there was more, talk within the town. And I was like, okay, I'm starting to kind of get it. And then, some of these people are a family. So then kind of putting those pieces together. And once I kind of really learned about it, I was like, well, let me read the book before I decide to watch the movie so I have a better understanding. It was hard. I think I felt a lot of guilt for some of my behavior, so maybe that was part of my change that I
Mm,
made,
okay.
to, just because I didn't know, and the sacrifice that occurred. And I remember reading it. I had broken my foot and I was sitting out for like drill team, like dance team that I did for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was reading it and I just looked out in this gymnasium and I was like, there's so much more to this life. And I can't even explain it, but I was like, this is not it. And that's where I kind of that call to join the military came in. But then I was reading that and I couldn't imagine what I still can't these men had to go through.
Oh my God, yes.
And so when I watched the movie, it's heart-wrenching,
Yeah.
you know? And I see how my dad was written about and how he was portrayed. And I mean, he does not play around and he's very serious. And because he has been in these kinds of situations, um, and I think I'm gonna get emotional and I gotta try not to. I always do with this part.
Sure.
Um, 2 seconds. Yeah. Just reading like Randy Shugart. I don't know why I have this like tension with him, but the sacrifice he made and his wife Stephanie like would call me Thumbelina, his wife and
Uh,
all these it's people.
yeah.
And to think back that they had to watch on television what was occurring there and what they had to go through, I will never be able to wrap my head around it. And so learning that and seeing what it actually costs to have our freedom, I was like, I have to do something. Here's a great place for me to take all this tension and this energy that I have and put it into something good and join the fight. And that's how I felt when I read it and watched it and really developed that perspective on it.
Did you sit down with your father at any point and say, hey, I just read this book and, I had no clue, what you went through and what this was all about. This is really, in my face now. Did you have like a heart to heart or something like that with him?
I think we talk about it in little doses,
Okay.
you know. Uh little bits here and there, we'll discuss it. But I think for him, he feels too, I don't want to speak too much for him, but he's had to move on. He can't keep reopening,
Hmm.
if you will, these chapters. Like for him, he's like, it's okay to reflect and look back, but you have to and not live in it, if you will. But we've only talked little bits here and there
You know,
about it.
and being a dad, there's something very special about having a daughter as well, where you want to protect them at all costs. And maybe that's part of it too, is to, you want to protect them physically and emotionally.
Yeah,
So that might be your pop saying, "Hey, you know what? This is what happened, whatever," but he doesn't want to get too into it too because he doesn't want to hurt you.
it could be part of it. It's a big, yeah, it's life altering, and
Yes, I mean that
there's so many layers to it.
not every family, has that.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever talk about the book or the movie? Did he watch those or did he even watch it or read the book?
He's read the book and then he watched the movie, I believe just one time.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that he, you know,
Well, I'm just wondering if he's saying, this is a bunch of Hollywood BS, how dare they, blah blah blah.
I mean, I think there's conversations within that for um the movie. For me, I go, movies are entertainment. There's that layer to it, and you
Right.
have to go, okay, they're
It's
doing this
they Hollywooded
a
up.
certain
Yeah.
way.
You're right.
Yes. And then he's done a documentary on it with the more, factual, this is what happened,
Oh,
which I
really?
believe is on YouTube now. I think it's public on YouTube. Um,
Do you know the title of
with
that
his,
by chance?
I think I would just Google or YouTube
Yeah,
Paul Howe Blackhawk Down. I'd have to ask him. I'm not
I
sure
will
what
do
the
that.
entity is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do that for sure. Okay.
And so he talks through it, and I think that was kind of his way, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah.
Okay. And like you said before, you can't live in the past. You can't
No.
even, learn from it. Obviously, that's why we have history, and that's why history should never be altered or flowered up or deleted. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And to me, I can, my son, he did two deployments. He was in Iraq, and he did the border also. And he was a Cav Scout. And when he was positioned with SEALs and Danish Special Forces of all
Oh,
people.
wow.
So I'd send him cigars every now and then. He said they kind of used them as currency, and I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, they're trading cigars with the Danes," and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
Yeah.
But I was thinking to myself, and I don't know how many guys that were, obviously I've never been Delta or, anything even remotely close to that, but I would almost feel let down because it just seems like they were forgotten and they should have had more backup. Being a cop, that's what you think of. It's like, it seems like they just kind of left them out there and their country kind of let them down a little bit.
Well, I think again that time and that political realm of that era, there's layers to that, and there was supposed to be a gunship overhead, you know. I can't remember the reason exactly why the gunships were sent to northern, I'm gonna butcher it, so I don't want people coming after me, but
Right.
I believe Northern Africa or Germany, somewhere away. They
Mm.
were there, they left. And so when they went out on this, they did not have the support to survive against a city,
Right.
you know?
And and the thing about it is, and I've had the honor of interviewing other military people, and lately I interviewed, his name is Rob D'Amico. He was a HRT operator for the FBI, and he had to go investigate what, 5 Americans were killed on a sailboat, and it was, off Somalia. It was Somali pirates, and and he was working with the SEAL team, and it was a rescue operation, but they had to go into Somalia
Mhm.
to get, the people who were, and they arrested them and brought them back to America, which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how do you go into a city that doesn't even have a government? It's mass
Yeah.
chaos.
Oh, yeah. That's the
All
only
it,
way to describe it.
yeah, it's complete mass chaos, and it's just run by warlords.
Hmm.
So how do you, it's not like there's a, you go to the mayor and say, hey, we're gonna, do X, Y, and Z. There is no such thing. It is just complete chaos.
And that's what I think people, as Americans, we forget. If you haven't seen it or been in that realm, you forget what our life is like here. We'll find every reason to complain,
You're
but
right.
there's so much going on outside of our bubble that is just, it's tragic at the end of the day. And we're so lucky, and that's why we had like that call to fight. That's why I fully believe in it, keeping what we have. And it was, we have it, it was built on a lot of sacrifice.
Absolutely. Because there were men and women that, answered the call and stood up to, evil. There's no
Hmm.
better way to put it. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, a good defense is a great offense, or a good defense
Yep.
is, it's
Yep.
same difference. It's like, there's a difference between having Chihuahua in your front yard and two German Shepherds. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's what it boils down to, kids. Even though I do have a Chihuahua mix, he's pretty tough. I gotta say, he is. Clark is he's a badass. I gotta
That's
say
funny. My parents have one too.
it. Yeah, he's a
Uh,
mix. He's Chihuahua and probably miniature pincher. But I tell you what,
uh,
there was a coyote in our backyard, and my daughter
mm,
was home, and she has a Rottweiler mix. It's a big dog.
mhm.
The Rottweiler ran back into our house, and there's Clark out there, all 15 pounds of him, growling at the coyote. And I'm like, dude, that's a snack you're gonna be his
Yeah.
appetizer tonight. Get your butt inside this house. Yeah, but he's growling, his hair's standing. I'm just like, oh my God, Clark. Oh
Oh, that's funny.
yeah.
That's so rough.
It is. Oh my gosh. So, post high school, you know, both your parents said, hey, Air Force. Do you know why they said Air Force?
'Cause they were in the army, Patrick. They were like Mary. If I think they probably saw some Air Force troops once their time, in their careers, and how they were probably staying at the nicer hotels and
Yes.
had little nicer things going on. So they're like, yeah, you need to join the Air Force. They knew who I was too, and I was like, I wouldn't do well on a cot.
Well,
So
just my friends, there is a lot of commonalities between military and police, obviously, and a
yes.
lot of, retired military people go into police work, or they do like, like 4 years or 5 years or 10 years in the military, then they segue to the police department. That's very common. And it was my honor when I was a brand new cop. I'm working late shift. Day shift we had all kinds of Vietnam vets, like
Hmm.
these hardcore Marines that
Yeah.
did some seriously badass stuff, and they were some of the nicest guys I had ever met. They were super helpful, and it's they all had the white styrofoam cup with black coffee and a cigarette. I mean, every one of them, they're grumbling away, and it's like, why the hell do you want to be a cop, kid? They're, oh, this is the
Oh,
worst time ever, blah blah blah. But they were so nice. I was, again, it was an honor to be around these guys.
yeah.
And, again, I think it's a natural segue. And I guess before we go into your Air Force career, I should ask, you interned with the police department. Why not become a cop?
I don't think I think if there was a time, I think my dad was probably made a comment or two like, don't do that.
Okay.
Um, and it's not, I think that for him, you talked about the protectiveness.
Yep.
That for him, I don't think he would sleep as well at night, having to worry about me, because he knows exactly what police officers go through,
Mm,
how difficult it is, the challenges. I remember, especially in high school, I would watch some of the training videos. I did a training and we listened to like I remember called by an audio. We've watched, how do you approach when you have someone who is on drugs? You're doing lethal force, you're escalating,
Hmm.
and watching what happens to some of these police officers when they are trying to use that escalation and the perpetrator goes and kills them sometimes. And so you're watching this, and I think that would stress him out for sure,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know,
You know,
that side of it.
and I mean, you've deployed into combat situations. You're in harm's way. How weird would that be
Different.
for your father, who's this badass Delta guy? That, now all of a sudden the shoe's on the other foot. I'm sure there was people worrying about him when, he deployed to all these, and it wasn't just Mogadishu, there's all kinds
Mhm.
of stuff that he has done that you'll probably never even know about. That's that's special operators. That's what they do,
Mhm.
so, they're used to everybody worrying about them. Now all of a sudden he's got to worry about you.
Yeah.
That would be a different feeling altogether.
I think so. I don't know. We've never talked about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be interesting to explore that because like with me, with my son, it's like, okay, he was used to having a dad that's a cop. I was a sergeant for 17 years. I was on the street the entirety of my career. I worked in the worst neighborhoods at night, for I don't know how long. And now all of a sudden he joins the army and he's in Iraq and he can't tell me where he is. And
Yeah.
I'm worried out of my mind. So now the shoe's on the other foot.
I don't know because I think both my parents, my mom did so well, at least on the surface, I'm sure there was an underlying worry, but with her, being an army brat and my grandfather deploying to Vietnam, going on a tour with SAS, all of this, like for them, no news was good news. That's the generation that they grew up in. If they're not hearing anything, that's great. That's what they want. And so for them, I think that helped my mom through. My dad, I don't know. I think we've never talked about it. Now that you say this, all.
Yeah, see that would be very challenging to me again, and it was. It's like, God, now I have to worry about my kid. I know he's in harm's way. He's in some faraway land doing some crazy stuff, and here I am sitting at home. And I'm like, "Ugh, I should be right next to him, damn it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
should be there with him, and I'm sure your dad probably had some tinges of that.
Yeah. Perhaps he did, but I think it goes back to like that's just what I remember is from my parents is no news is good news.
Yeah.
That was the mantra.
Okay. So, was your family background ever discussed when you went into the Air Force? Did you feel like you had to be the best at what you did because you had such a lineage?
I kept it quiet as long as I could. I definitely like I didn't tell people. I think they found out. I
Okay.
don't remember telling people. I might have spoke to my so I had two civilian gunner instructors once you get to the schoolhouse. Shout out to Tony Millhouse and Al Williams. They're the smartest gunners. God bless them for putting up with all of us and teaching us how to do it. But so they were gunners during the time that when my dad was in, and I think there might have been a little bit of conversation there because of that commonality. But I really tried to keep it quiet until at least I got through. And then there was some pilot at the unit knew who I was and
Okay.
kind of outed me, and then it kind of trickled in. But I just tried to do what I needed to do, and and even when it did come out, it's not something I talk about that much, you
Okay.
know.
All
So
right. I would think that eventually somebody's, because again, that's like that's Army royalty almost, or combat arms royalty is,
very kind.
you're a Delta guy, and then Grandpa founded Delta. I mean, that's that's not a lot of people can say that,
No.
So you're going through the training, and did you know immediately what you wanted to do in the Air Force, or how did that come about? You're a gunner on this AC-130U, correct? Is that the
Hmm.
okay? So this huge gunship. They have three different guns, if I remember correctly. And I should talk about this now. I It's hard for me to wrap my head around you have this big lumbering plane that has three different kinds of guns going, what, 150 miles an hour? Thereabouts when you're in an orbit.
Oh gosh, don't ask me not numbers. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
so it's, I was asking my buddy the mechanic about this last night, and he said, yeah, they can go about 300, but sometimes when you're doing the orbits, you're going slower.
Yeah.
And, there's ways of, all the techie stuff, but you're going around and you have to factor in distance, how fast the plane is going, temperature, barometric pressure, wind direction. How the hell do you deliver rounds accurately? I mean, it's amazing to me.
It's someone way smart, a lot of people way smarter than me. There's someone you should have on your show. I'll name drop them after this.
Okay.
That is like the godfather of gunships. And he can speak very eloquently on all of this and has written a book, if not two, and was a part a lot of the training, right? So
Mhm.
there's think about, so in the Air Force you're going to bring a new airplane online. They're in a training state for probably a very long time where they're developing this. So they have their algorithms and do all of their stuff way above my pay grade. We factor in, altitude,
Yep.
you have to think about winds at different altitudes as things are going
Oh,
down.
yeah, yeah.
And so whatever they did, the science and the magic that makes everything happen as accurately as it does, but we can sight. So just like you're sighting your rifle, you can go in and you do your practice shots. Okay, I need to make this many adjustments and then shoot a few more. We do that from the plane as well. So we can go, okay, we're off by however many meters. Okay, we're going to readjust our
Hmm.
numbers and we're going to put it back in. Same kind of concept. Again, way above my levels. I was just a dumb gunner. So I don't know. They did a lot of things to get there, but we factor all that into the computer systems
Okay.
and then send it.
I mean, to me, that's just mind blowing. Whoever came up with all of that and controls that and makes sure, I mean, because you can't have accidents. You have to be
No.
accurate.
Oh, and yes, we train to that standard. Um, you're training I call it marrying the guns up to the system, right? So the guns are on hydraulic mounts. So they move mechanically. This was the U model that I was on. I believe things are different now. And they marry up to the electronic system in the airplane. So that way the electronics can then send signals to say, hey, I want you to move whichever way. So when you're in the back of the plane and you're at altitude and you're making these adjustments, these guns are, they're moving around like this. And if anyone's seen a 105, it's massive, and it recoils like 4 feet into the aircraft when it shoots.
Holy
So
cow.
you have to have situational awareness for that. But yeah, it's a beast.
Yeah. So how long? Well, first off, how did you get involved in being a gunner on an airship like that? And, you know, and how long was the training before you were actually deployed and doing it for real?
So when I joined the Air Force, basically I talked to someone and they were like, Mary, you need to put all flying jobs on your dream, like you get a
Yeah.
dream sheet when you go to MEPS. And they're like, okay. He said, Mary, whatever you do, put all flying jobs on it. You want to fly. And I was like, okay. At the same time, the first book I read about the Air Force, because again, I knew more about the Army, was about pararescue.
Yeah.
And so I
Peaches.
kind of
Yeah.
learned a little bit about that, started exploring like what it is to be an aviator and applied for that. It just happened to work out where the billets, I guess, lined up and I went and got my date for basic training. So I knew I didn't go open general, which is something people can do where they just are like, give me whatever job, I'm just going to go to basic training.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was going to be once I was in. So I did basic training. Then you go to your air crew fundamentals, which is a very basic, hey, can you drink from the fire hose? Can you figure out how an aircraft flies? You do all of it's academic. And then you go into your gunner portion. And that is before they send you out to what your airframe is. So it's helicopters and fixed wing aircraft. So the gunship. and you're going through and you're learning about all the different weapon systems at a very, a surface level scoop of
Hmm.
information. And then once I think it's the needs of the Air Force at that point where they
Sure.
pick where you're going to go. So most of us went to Hurlburt Field, Florida, to be on gunships. I think we had one guy go to helicopters while we were there. And then that determines like your water survival. So I went to SEER right after that. And then I went to water survival
Okay, I gotta
afterwards.
stop you at Sear because they I've heard
People
some
love
crazy.
SEER.
Yeah, I got it's some crazy stuff because was that search not search what is SERE? It's
Survive, evade, rescue, and escape.
right. So how long was that training?
I think it's 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, 4.
Okay. Now my
It's
friend
like a
that
month.
Rick, my friend that was a PJ and in the CIA, he had to go through that. He said they stripped him naked, put him in this little box, and more or less blindfolded him and just beat the shit out of him on a regular basis.
I don't know what level you went through,
Yeah, I know
but
there's different levels, but he's
there's
telling
different
me about this, and
levels.
I'm just like, oh my God, I wonder if Mary Catherine went through this.
The worst part was the outdoors part for me. I like again from Texas, it's flat where I'm from in Texas. And so I go up there, it's winter, there's mountains.
Oh.
I've never camped. I don't know anything about land navigation. And I'm like, I can't stand this. So you go each day and you're like traveling the woods and doing all the things. And that part was challenging for me. Really
Okay.
challenging. Yeah,
Now,
the rest
did
of it was
did they
okay.
do like a simulated POW camp?
Um, yeah, there's some training for, all of that to
Yeah.
prepare you. You have to be ready that way, in the news that there was a pilot, that was rescued recently
Yes.
from Iran, and it's like this is what that training is preparing you for if that day comes. So it's very important. Yeah.
So yeah, so they did not put you in a box, blindfold you, and strip you naked.
I It sounds like your friend did a different level.
Oh, okay. I know there is different levels. Okay, I was just
There are
wondering. It's
different,
like, holy
yeah,
cow. Yeah, like I said,
mature.
he got regular beatings. Yeah, they just beat the shit out of him.
Oh,
You
well,
know? So you were running
I'm
around
sorry
the
for your friend.
yeah. So you're running around the woods. You're doing land nav. You're doing all
Yeah.
this stuff, and then you said you had to do like ocean survival. What was that like?
hmm That was also not my favorite. I still live in Florida, but the ocean, there's sharks. It's a
Yeah, there
mental
are.
thing. It's a mental thing. But that one it's a little bit shorter and they just are walking you through, hey, if your plane goes down over water, if you have the big 20-man like life rafts, how are you and your crew going to get in? If you have zippers, you can't be popping your only thing that keeps you afloat. So you have
Yeah.
to learn protocols. And then they take you up in like a parasail kind of situation, and you have to actually unbuckle from the parasail and go right down into the water. And that was just, I was like, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, it's only a couple hours, Mary. It's only a couple of hours. We can do it. And then you get your 1-man life raft, which is what if you, once I got to Hurlburt, you have to practice all of this
Yeah.
you don't, of course, jump out, but you have to prepare for if there's an emergency. So you have this big old pack that's attached to you on the back of your parachute, and then you have to figure out how to, unlatch it
Mm,
appropriately. Once you're in the water, you have to get off of your chute so you don't, it doesn't take you under,
right.
all of those things. So, yeah,
Now,
it's fascinating.
how many jumps did you have to take, or how many jumps have you made?
You just do one. So there's no jumps. We don't do
Oh,
like any like airborne or anything.
okay.
Because if I'm jumping out of the plane, I'm having a very bad day,
I would think so. Yes.
very bad. Never something I wanted to do. So, yeah, just the one time in water survival where you just kind of drop down to the water is the only time
Okay.
I've like experienced it.
All right. Gotcha. Now, I interviewed Jack Carr. I,
Okay.
I'm sure you know who he is.
Yep.
And I asked him, it's like, how did you get through buds? The worst part about, like SEAL training. And he said he thought of all these vets that have been through all these different wars, and the horrific stuff that they push through. And he says, they're just squirting me with water, depriving me of food and sleep, and messing with me and doing push-ups and sit-ups. He says, I'm not storming the beaches of Normandy. Yeah, and that was his mindset. He says, I can get through anything because look what people before me have had to endure. He said, this is a piece of cake. Obviously it's not a piece of cake, but that was his mind frame. So whenever you have a difficult time in either your military or civilian life, do you ever think about what your family members went through and push forward? Does that enter your head?
100%. I love Jack Carr's answer, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
Um, I do. I think about, my grandfather went to Vietnam twice,
Oh,
and he was shot with a 50 cal,
oh,
and I don't know how many transfusions he had, but that man did not have the will to die. He was going to make it. And so
yeah.
I have to remember that. And then when I think about, everything that my dad went through, and I couldn't imagine after, not to harp on it. And again, I don't live here, but just to think about those men that had to run out of a city, run a mile,
Yeah.
geared up, running out of ammo. The city's coming in on you, and you have to fight. And this is what my dad talks about a lot. And that's why I watched how he, reflect, move forward. I watched how he moved forward. He said, you have to stay in the fight. And so that's the mentality I always tried to fall back on when I want to cave in on myself or feel bad for myself. Um, the worst day that my dad has had and my grandfather had, I will never have that
Right.
ever. And so it's a great reframe because then I think about the freedom I have and what we just have so much of it and we forget. You know, we talk about running water. I will write down in my gratitude journal like running water, a
Oh,
hot
yeah.
shower,
Oh,
things you have to remind yourself of it and then you go life is really great. It really is. And
it,
so I just try to no, I just try to fall back on that. Like it's the little things and I wouldn't trade my spot on the timeline for anything in this world that we live in. And I just try to really ground myself in that and know it's not that bad and I got this.
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Now, when you were in the Air Force, you were a gunner, on the
Mhm.
AC-130U. Yeah. How many combat missions did you deploy to?
I did 4.
Okay. Can you talk too much about them or not?
Yeah, I did 2 to Afghanistan and then I did 2 to Iraq. We were stationed like based out of other places during Iraq. This was like the ISIS time
Mm,
frame for those ones. Um yeah, four total deployments. Being a gunner, the training they're training you to perfection and to execute under pressure and to do the exact same thing every time to default. You want to default mode back into if something goes wrong. For us, it's if the aircraft, if there's an emergency, we need to get out of the airplane. The guns, they have like mechanical and electrical malfunctions that can happen, especially the 40 millimeter. So they train you to be able to go through everything when, blacked out conditions and make sure you know how to get the gun back on the line so you can provide fires as necessary. So all of that went into it. And then, you go down range. I don't know if there's anything you'd like me to
Well,
talk about. I don't know. There's,
is there a specific mission that you weren't on that really sticks in your head?
yeah, my first mission will always stay with me.
Okay.
So I was 20 years old on my first deployment, which is just wild to think about now.
You're a baby. Oh my God, 20 is so young for
Yeah,
that kind of situation. Oh my gosh.
yeah. I had the best crew I could ever imagine. God bless the gun deck I had, the pilots, the officers, the sensors, like they were shit hot. I was so lucky to be a baby gunner with them. And so we had flown a couple times in country, and it was right before Christmas, and there was an operation overhead that we were overhead. And I'll never forget. I don't know why the pilot. We were supposed to hit a tanker that night
Okay.
to refuel, air to air refuel, I'll never forget the pilot just going, "Nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay over the op we were on." And because it would have taken us like an hour,
Sure.
to do that and come back. So we're staying over. These guys, we're watching them, and phenomenal. Like I've never seen special operators at that point, like actual special operations. And the what we kind of talked about, the tiers, and these
Yeah.
guys moved. It's like a dance. It was so well executed watching their movements. And we're watching him come up this ridge line, and they start taking fire. And I was in the booth, the battle management center where all the screens are. And I remember watching one of the individuals just hit the rock
Oh,
and just did not get back up.
oh.
And so you're seeing that, and then you start hearing it on
So you're on the
comms because
same
you're
comms. You're hearing everything as it's going
mm-hmm,
on. Wow.
yep. And so you can hear it in their voice, and then there's this stillness that takes over on the aircraft side where we're about to need to put the guns on the line, we're about to engage. So as soon as that happened, the gunners went to the back. We started putting all the guns on the line and waited for the calls to come in. So at that point, I couldn't see one, and just started firing. There were multiple, insurgents in a cave that we were shooting in this area. We got around, I want to say 12 to 14 meters within friendlies with the 40 millimeter,
Wow.
which is it's unheard of.
Yes.
So there's danger close, which means once we're in a certain radius, there's a possibility of friendlies becoming fragged. And we were 14 meters away from our friendly
Oh
forces
my God.
to get them out of where they were located so they could get out because they needed to return. They had one killed in action.
Yeah.
And then I talk about Jimmy Hill, who I know, he was shot, I want 5 or 6 times. And so they had to get him medevaced out. As this is all happening, now we're running out of fuel. But if we would have taken that tanker, like I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
That that those little decisions, we wouldn't have been there.
Sure. You saved their
And
lives.
so and so yeah, they're phenomenal people. And so um I learned, I went, holy shit, like life, it was so fast watching that happen, and to go how quickly you can lose your life in this. And it just gave me this appreciation that I need to hold on to, of seeing the sacrifice made up front and seeing how fast it can happen. And you need to live, not uh, the cliche of living every day like your last, but you need to wake up every day and put forward some action into it. And I remember I ran into, I've seen Jimmy a few times since, and so it had been like 7 or 8 months since this incident, and
Yeah.
we were flying over, and we went and had like dinner with him and another guy on the team, and he was still in crutches,
Oh
you
God.
know, and he's one of the most resilient people I know, and he's doing well now. But it just shows you that aftermath and the reality around it. And so I'll never forget that
Were they
mission.
were they SEALs or Rangers or
They were British.
oh they're Brits. Okay.
Hmm.
Wow. It's so
Yeah,
wow, that's crazy. So what do you miss the most or least about your military career?
there's a feeling, and it's hard to put into words. There's like this community, um, that I got your back
Mm,
when shit really hits the fan. When you're actually, you know, when you've deployed and done all of that, and that camaraderie that comes with it, like
yes.
that's something for sure. It's just there's an air about it, and it's hard to um verbalize, but that's something I miss for sure.
Well, when you're on a mission, there was how many crew members to make all this happen on this AC-130?
This was one of the lessons one of my gunner mentors, Carlos, taught me. He's like, it takes 13 people to shoot that weapon. He's like, don't ever forget that.
Wow.
And it does. To be
Wow.
all on the same page, screens, flying the plane, everything. 13 people to go, okay, this is what we're going to do.
You all have to work in concert. Yeah, that is amazing to me. So, post-military life, what made you, what, how did you come to the decision to leave the Air Force?
I think there's many things, that I didn't see myself retiring from it.
Okay.
And there were some things at the time where I felt that buzz, that feeling of frustration, and almost kind of like my purpose, I strayed from my purpose,
Hmm.
if you will. And I would not have done well at the time because I'm not a yes man. If I had to go up the ranks, I was going to die a crew dog, and that's what I
Oh,
did.
okay. Gotcha.
And so I just decided, hey, it's time. And I went ahead and started the transition out. And I did 2 years in the reserves as an instructor, augmenting the schoolhouse training, like the brand new gunners that come in
Hmm.
through the pipeline. So I did that. And then I started my nursing career, or my journey towards my nursing career.
Okay. So, right now you are a nurse practitioner. So, you continue to be of service. Can you explain that?
I don't know. I think it's in my blood. Oh, I truly believe in service. I think that's so important. Servant leadership, that's what I was taught. That's what I saw too from my parents. My mom is so actively involved in the community, Daughters of the American Revolution, Colonial Dames, keeping history alive. And then my dad, every day, he's a trainer, trains law enforcement, all of that, and watching them and seeing how important service was. And that's what I've always kind of been drawn to. And so with nursing, I was like, okay, this is a place where there's so many fields. So I have flexibility. If there's an area I can transition, but I'm still getting to serve and be there. It's always about the person next to you, always. And so I've always just I think it's important to keep a job where you keep that in your line of sight.
Yeah, there is no better job than to be of service to others. I don't think the rewards are immense.
Yeah.
And until you've done it, I just can't imagine being in a cube for like 20, 30 years and that's your life. I I think I don't know how people do it. God bless them. I mean, it needs to be done, but
Yeah.
I I couldn't. I had to be out there, and that whole thing of being of service to your fellow man or woman is, I know it sounds corny, but it's so true.
It's so true.
There's nothing better.
No.
So yeah, it just yeah, if there's anybody young listening to this, it's like just find something where you're of service and you cannot go wrong. I don't think. That's the way I see it. So
It's the
what
only, yeah, yeah.
so what if your daughter wakes up one day and says, "Mom, I want to join the Army or the Air Force or whatever." What are you going
Yeah,
to
let
say
me
to
join the Air Force.
her?
Oh man. If that's what she wanted, I would say
Okay.
okay. But I think for me, I had that motherly, like, you
Right.
know, that fear, if you will. But I think you have to put that down and let them figure it out. And if that's what she wants, and especially if she's doing it because she feels the call to serve, hey, do it. Do only a 4-year contract, and then we'll
Yeah,
talk.
exactly. All
Yeah.
right. So, what are your thoughts on mandatory service out of high school? I know certain countries do this and I think I know the answer, where you have to do like a mandatory 2 years, say, where it's either digging ditches, working in a hospital, picking up garbage, doing infrastructure stuff, or being in the military. Because I don't believe in military drafts because it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
It just isn't. But I do believe service is for everybody, and I think it should be mandatory.
I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think it would too. And it's
Yeah.
like you do your 2 years, and then the government pays for your college education or
Heck
your
yeah.
trade school or something like that. But you earned it. You
Yeah.
actually went out and dug ditches, laid asphalt, did whatever. You did work. And if you're not physically able to do that, then you work in a library, or you're doing, research, or there's 100 million different things that could be done.
Hmm.
Or, yeah, you protect your country, you join the military.
Yeah. I always say people should join the military and wait tables. Those are two jobs
Oh,
that people should do.
oh, hell yeah. Working in the
Oh,
service industry, in a restaurant or something like
yeah,
that, wow, that opens your eyes. It's like,
it
man,
really does. Yeah, I did
yeah.
that for some time too. So,
So let's
uh,
start landing the plane, Mary. Pun intended.
love
All
it.
right. Where's your book? You've been through a lot of stuff. You've seen a lot of stuff, and with your family history, there's more than one book in there, I'm thinking.
Well, I do write. So I have a
You do.
Substack where I write about kind of the unfinished part, the process of life, where I'm like, hey, I want to start sharing my perspective on from my lived in experience from being a combat veteran to healthcare. I know people and I know service and I know hard work and just translating those lessons. So I'm starting to kind of do that. And I have a book that I am loosely, lightly writing. I'm not in a rush because I'm still figuring out the direction of it, but I want to help people with getting not necessarily through, but understanding the process and finding their will in their fight because it looks different. I always thought your fight was something external, like the PT, the physical endurance, everything like that. I did not understand that it was the battle of the mind. And once I figured that out, I was like, oh. And so I'm just writing things down as I'm going through them and learning and collecting the lessons for now.
See, I knew there was a book in you. I knew it. So, all right,
It's in there. Yeah.
I'm anxiously awaiting. I think that you have a very unique perspective that very few have,
Hmm.
and that could help a lot of people, I think. But yeah, let's finish this up. Where can people go to learn more about you?
So I have my website, marycatherinehowe.com. You can go on there, and then that will connect you to my Substack, which is where I share my writings, and it's called Unfinished Business: Life in the Middle. And I try to do two a month, where I'm sharing kind of essays about different things. And then I also do one a month about faith, more of my lessons. It's not teachy preachy, but faith is very important to me, and I just like to share what I'm learning about. So there, then I'm on Facebook. I have one. I do not get on it, but I am on Instagram. That is my primary home. And
Oh,
then I have a TikTok, but again, I just post there, but I'm not on it. Instagram is my main home.
okay. Do you know your handle on Instagram? Or you could probably get through your website too, right? You have the
Yep,
links.
it should connect, and it's just if you
Yeah.
search Mary Catherine Howe, I should come
Okay.
up.
All right, perfect. All right, Mary Catherine, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been just a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick. I greatly appreciate it. This was awesome.
Thank you for joining myself and my special guest, Mary Howe. I guess all I can say is thank you for yours, your mom, dad, and grandpa's service. Because of all of your sacrifice, our nation is a better place. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Cops and Riders podcast. If you haven't done so yet, could you take a minute and rate and review the show on Stitcher or Apple Podcasts? If you have already, thank you. As always, thank you for all of your support, and, of course, let's be careful out there.